Kareem Ray, your host at the One Soccer Nation podcast. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Kyle Sheldon. Kyle is the founder and CEO of Name and Number, and he also has a new company called Pathway. Kyle, how's it going?
Great, Kareem. It's great to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time. So, Kyle, can you take us back in time and just share how you got involved in the beautiful game?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's a very simple beginning. I'm the eldest of four kids, and it really is as simple as my parents signed us up to play soccer when we were young. We played other sports growing up, but ultimately soccer became the thing that was the sport we most enjoyed and most pursued. It was how my family connected and bonded and ultimately spent time together. A lot of road trips going to soccer tournaments kind of across the East Coast and Midwest. And all four of my siblings and myself played soccer in college. So it was something that kind of stuck with us. And now three out of the four kids have worked in the sport. So it's always been a really important part of our family's lives. And for me, obviously, a really important part of my career.
Awesome. Could you just share with our viewers where you're based out of and where you grew up?
Yeah, I moved around a lot as a kid, Kareem. My dad was in the hotel industry, and so started in Michigan. I was born in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and lived in Indiana, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and my folks settled in West Virginia. But my career's kind of taken me across the country a number of different times. But I'd say we spent the bulk of our youth, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, and then just driving across the country to soccer tournaments.
Amazing. So just stuck in the US.
That's right. Yep.
Awesome. Kyle, your journey from Major League Soccer to founding Name and Number is fascinating. What inspired you to transition from a prominent role in the MLS to launching a soccer-specific marketing and creative agency?
Yeah, I think the starting point is I've always had a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. My siblings and I were all homeschooled. So my mom, who kind of led our education, really encouraged us to pursue things we were passionate about, right? Taught to be curious and ask questions and solve problems. As I mentioned, soccer was always kind of my number one seed, if you will. So I was fortunate to be able to build a career working primarily in MLS and loved my time working on the club side. There's nothing quite like working for a team and having the highs of a successful season or a win, as well as the lows and just what that is like to be part of a team. But I've always had a little bit of interest in starting my own thing. And so I started consulting as an individual last year. And like a lot of folks in the sport have seen the trajectory over the last decade, all of the growth metrics are on an upward trajectory. And then you look into the future and see not only the 2026 FIFA World Cup coming to our shores, but Copa America, the FIFA Club World Cup, hopefully the Women's World Cup coming in 27, the Olympics in LA around the corner. There's just this amazing window of opportunity for the sport. And in looking at the landscape of sports marketing agencies that are in the US and North America at the moment, there are only a handful that really call themselves soccer specific or soccer specialists. And so I thought there was room for another, and fortunately have had a good first year. We're just over a year in and feel really good about the decision to launch this thing. And we're still figuring it out, but it's been a lot of fun.
Nice. For any soccer guys or soccer people that, surf or know about surfing, this is you mentioned a bunch of events, huge events that are coming up in America that will be hosted there. This is a huge wave to catch. And, just tracking back a little bit, in your experience, you've been in the MLS for a few decades. We're talking about back in the days when people were asking, or investors were asking, will soccer survive in America? Right. So from, a few decades back to when you got involved, what's the difference now from what you're seeing in regards to where MLS is back a few decades, 2 decades ago to where it is now?
Thanks for correcting the few to two, Kareem. You're making me feel old there. I was in the league a long time. My first season with DC United in 2005, so it does go back a bit, almost 20 years. I think there's a running joke inside the soccer community that soccer's been the sport of the future for like 50 years, dating back to the NASL, and I think that still continues to some extent. But the league when I joined the league was just in a period of its first expansion after contracting a few years prior and losing teams in Miami and Tampa Bay. And you saw Salt Lake and Chivas USA, who now has kind of evolved eventually into LAFC. But at that time, there was still a lot of uncertainty about where the league was going, right, 20 years ago. And now it's clearly on very firm footing. You've gone from 10, 12 teams when I started in the league almost 20 years ago to now you're approaching your 30th pretty quickly. And you've seen soccer specific stadiums built across the country. You're seeing the growth of NWSL. And one of the things I always call out that I don't think people sort of give enough attention to is the growth of the sports popularity in all the mid-sized and smaller markets. I mean, the growth of USL, the United Soccer League, and all the teams across men's and women's divisions. There are places where there are teams, popular teams, and it's not 20,000 people, but 3, 4, 5, 8, 10,000 people going to games in these smaller mid-sized markets. And so the growth across the entire country has really been the thing that's been fascinating to me. And it's still not there in terms of the big kind of, they're not NFL, it's not NBA, but it's now in the conversation with NHL and MLB in a way that it wasn't 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think soccer is missing in the US to take it to that next level, to pass basketball, to pass baseball?
Time. I think it's generational. I think it's sort of as simple as that. I mean, when I came into the league, MLS started when I was in high school. And I remember even thinking kind of at that time that it was probably a generation away from really seeing a big uptick. And sports are generational, right? It's something that's passed on from fathers and mothers to sons and daughters. And I've got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old now, and man, they're already into it, right? We watch Premier League games on Saturday morning, and if the game's not on too late, we'll watch an MLS playoff game this weekend. And they love it, right? They're talking about Mbappe and Messi. And so I think it's just time. I really do. And I think you've seen the growth of interest, not only around the domestic leagues, but your accessibility now to the international leagues is you can watch just about any league in the world in this country. It's one of the only places in the world you can do it. If you want to watch Eredivisie, you can. If you want to watch Bundesliga, you can. And so I really just think it's as simple as time and more exposure for folks who are likely to be soccer fans in the future.
Yeah, I want to quote Darren Van Tassel. I've added the opportunity to have him on the podcast, owner of Tremendous FC and USL One, if I remember correctly. He said soccer was brought up to him from the younger generation up, which was something cool, something that I heard for the first time. So you mentioned it being passed down. He mentioned it being passed up. So super cool. Just wanted to quote him there. The other thing you mentioned, the GOAT, Messi. We're seeing the impact that he's having on the US. It's kind of just like a little tease because he's just, he's one of the greatest players in the world to be here in the US. But the World Cup is like, you're having all the best players from around the world come to one location. And it's such a big, you understand marketing, marketing. So this is a huge marketing opportunity. It's a huge moment to impact millions and millions and millions of people in the world, or, not only the world, but in the US specifically, and let them get a taste of it.
Yeah, I don't think people really understand the magnitude of what 2026 will be yet. Certainly the folks that are in the sport and thinking about it every day do, but the general public does not. Obviously, and this, Kareem, but the tournament's expanding from 32 to 48 teams. It's going to be in more cities than ever before. It's in 3 countries for the first time ever. I did a little math on the capacity for the host stadiums. And assuming they all sell out, which I think they will, the average capacity is about 70,000, right? So still the best attended World Cup to date is 1994 in the US, and that was around 3.5, these are round numbers, but around 3.5 million. That hasn't been surpassed since. With the number of games that will be in the 2026 World Cup, that number is very likely to pass 7 million total fans in attendance at the game. It's just a massive number. And just to kind of reiterate or sort of connect to an earlier point, which is, the host cities are going to be jamming. It's going to be amazing, right? You're going to have fan fests and events and clinics and soccer field dedications. But I think people don't also understand how significant it's going to be for every other mid-size and major market in the US. I think every city is going to be throwing parties and having events and doing soccer clinics. And I think it's just going to be this amazing month-long celebration of the sport in a way that it couldn't have been in 94 because it wasn't as popular. And certainly a large reason why I launched Name and Number and have launched the second company, Pathway, is because of that vision and what's coming. And, it'll be this massive moment, but I think it's only going to be, it'll just change the trajectory again. It'll go from here to here, but then it's just going to keep going up because people are going to fall in love with it from that exposure of that tournament. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're seeing a lot of people get on their horses here and try to get in position. I think you're in a great position right now. One Soccer Nation, we're still working on getting a position and, getting a home. But with saying that, Name and Number works with diverse clients, including Borussia Dortmund and Seattle Sounders FC. Can you share some exciting projects or campaigns you've been involved in that showcases the agency's ability to connect with American soccer fans and culture?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned two of the clients we've worked with. We're just a year old, right? So we launched just over a year ago. We've been really fortunate to have some really fun projects and folks to collaborate with. Certainly, a club like Borussia Dortmund, one of the giants of the Bundesliga and of European soccer. We were able to support their U.S. tour when they came this summer, and that was really great. Got to go out to San Diego and kind of support their efforts there. Seattle Sounders, you can see the scarf over my shoulder. I've been working on that project for the last 2 years, helping them navigate their brand evolution. Just an amazing project to work really closely with the club's supporters and fans and season ticket holders and stakeholders, players, etc., to develop that identity. Just to mention quickly, we did some work for Major League Soccer this year with Leagues Cup, so got to be a part of that inaugural tournament between MLS and League MX, and we mentioned him already, but the introduction of a fellow named Lionel Messi was quite fun to be thrown into the mix there. Did a project for United Soccer League. We've got a project ongoing right now with Quick Goal where we're helping to tell kind of their incredible brand story, right? A brand that you sort of don't necessarily think of right away, but their impact on accessibility to the sport in this country over the last 40 years has been really fun. And a handful of others. Caledonian Braves, a small team in Scotland. We helped them with a fundraising project for selling a stake of ownership. A fifth division club in Scotland, you could own a little piece if you wanted to. And then a great upstart apparel company out in New York called Diaza, who are really football apparel specialists, kit design specialists. So every project's different, because every fan base, every customer base is different. Soccer fandom in the U.S., this, Kareem, it's unlike any other sport in the world. The nuance that exists across supporters and fan bases is really varied. It's been a lot of fun. Ultimately, the team that I have put together, both full-time and collaborators, we've all spent time working in soccer specifically. So we bring that understanding of kind of the nuance that exists to any project, whatever it may be.
Yeah, having that soccer background and experience is always helpful. Like you guys specifically focus on soccer, so I really appreciate that. And there's a lot of value that comes with that because I've spoken to, other marketers, but they don't really understand or know soccer. They haven't lived it. They don't really know what it is. So I always valued that. That is a very valuable experience that you guys have, and I appreciate the focus. You mentioned a club that you guys helped sell that they were selling 5% of their company.
It was the percentage. I don't actually know what the total percentage will be, but it's a fifth division Scottish club called Caledonian Braves, and we built out a full campaign for them. They did a WeFunder campaign to sell a percentage of the club to fans around the world. So that was one of the projects we took on this year.
Understood. So yeah, that's that. I've seen that on WeFunder, and I recently just had Rita Zell on from WeFunder on the podcast. That's going to be it's out already. It's out on the podcast, so
yeah.
It's out. I've seen that WeFunder campaign that you guys have helped with saying that. So how did the logistics work with that? Did you guys go down there and shoot that, or did they come here? How did that all work out?
Yeah, just to note, I know Reed. I worked with Reed. He was a conduit for that project, and he's great. I'll look forward to listening to that interview. We went out to Glasgow twice, so we flew out to Glasgow and shot a bunch of footage, did a bunch of fun stuff, did some kind of documentary style storytelling, and did a bunch of. We launched them on TikTok. So one of the real success stories of that project was. We worked with two really great video creators out of North Carolina called Andrew Stewart and Jordan Presley, who work under Boost Football. They're awesome. You should look them up. And we flew them out and said, we want to just produce a ton of great, fun, playful videos for TikTok. So we launched them on TikTok. They helped us grow to 10,000 followers. And Jordan and Andrew sort of did a day in the life of an American owner in Scotland. And as TikTok can sometimes do, if you get it right and you prime the pump the right way, it popped off and we got 1.3 million views on that video, which was really cool. So it really drove awareness of the team, which is small and only has a handful of employees, and sort of every dollar matters for a team like that. And ultimately, helps drive investment, which is going to be a massive help to that club.
Amazing. So it's music to my ears. We're at One Soccer Nation. We're connecting the dots here. So we got to do a future collab soon.
That's great.
Actually, I want to ask you this first. So in regards to clients that you guys take on, do you guys take on anyone that reaches out to you, or do you have a specific filtering process? And how do you go about that? How do you go about receiving leads and then taking them through your sales process? What does that look like? And then executing the work.
Yeah, you can imagine, Kareem, it varies. I mean, I think we've been fortunate that I've been in the sport such a long time and have a pretty decent network that a lot of the interest has been inbound. And so it really does depend on what the ask is. We try to be really transparent with what we're good at and where we need to bring in other folks to support. Um, the model that I've kind of developed over the course of the last year. I started it was just me, and I brought on freelancers and collaborators depending on what the project need was. But the process typically is you really just try to understand what someone's needs are, what they're trying to achieve. I love starting with objectives and understanding the business objective of what they're trying to do. I'm kind of a branding creative guy at heart, but if you don't have the thread and the kind of overlay of understanding the business objective, then branding creative can kind of be for naught. So usually we start there. And then it just depends what it is. We've left our capabilities pretty broad. A lot of the work we've done this year has been, I would say, kind of marketing and campaign strategy and development, a lot of video production, creative production. But we build a bespoke team based on the needs of the client. So it does vary, and that's part of what makes it fun. Is that there's a lot of different projects going on at any one time.
Nice. Do you guys have like a cap on how many clients you guys take on?
We don't. We haven't had to at the moment. We've had a couple stretches in the summer where it was very very busy, and I probably wasn't spending enough time with my wife and kids, maybe not getting enough sleep. But it's about just making sure we can bring the right people on the project. So again, I have a pretty deep network of collaborators, and you sort of assess as you go and in real time to say, do we need to bring more people onto this project? Do we need a video editor, a shooter, a producer, a photographer? Do we need a graphic designer? And you just try to adapt based on the needs of that kind of moment in time and the needs of the client.
Got it. I just want to go back to the Scottish project one last time. Our
Sure.
project is pretty similar to that project. So how long did it take you guys to complete that? All the market. Can you just mention all the marketing that you guys helped them do and how long that took?
Yeah, the founder and owner of the Braves is a guy named Chris Ewing, and he was the first person to reach out to me after I launched Name and Number last November. I think within 24 hours, he had a message in my inbox, and so that was really where the conversation started. The project really kicked off in earnest, kind of in Q1 this year. I'm it's a little bit round numbers on this, but the development process was probably about 6 to 8 weeks of deciding and ideating what's the campaign, what's the voice, what's the tonality, what's the look and feel, that whole process of development. I flew to Glasgow with my brother, who's a filmmaker. We did 3 intensive days of just filming as much as we could, doing interviews. And then there's obviously a process to edit those videos and kind of prep them for launch. And then the part that is a little bit inside baseball and behind the scenes, but there's a process for a team that's from Scotland to incorporate in the US and file with the SEC and kind of get all the paperwork in order before you can actually give out what is a real dividend, right? It's an actual share in the club. It's not sort of just, it's not monopoly money. So that takes some time. And then once all that's in order, you launch the campaign, and it's still ongoing. I would say we spent about 8 weeks really focused on driving interest, awareness, content, media coverage, and now the Braves themselves are kind of continuing to run the campaign after our initial launch.
Nice. And they've been successful. They've raised, if I remember correctly, about $300,000 plus.
I think that's right. Yeah, and I think for a small club like that, it's a fifth division club that didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago. It's a significant amount of money that will really help them. Hopefully, and the vision obviously is over the course of the next 10, 15 years is to try to climb the Scottish pyramid system and eventually get to the top.
Absolutely. With your experience leading social media at NASCAR, how do you integrate lessons from motorsports into the soccer world to enhance engagement and community building?
I think that was a left turn of a question, so fitting that the topic is NASCAR. It's the one window, Kareem, where I spent outside of soccer. I did it really intentionally because I wanted to kind of learn at a bigger company, bigger industry. NASCAR, it's a little bit niche in that motorsports is inherently a little bit niche, but it's a big business. I mean, it's Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. The entry point to fandom is sort of similar. I actually liken it a little bit to soccer in that you have to understand it to really appreciate it. If you don't understand what's happening on the track or in the lead up to a race, it's really difficult to enjoy it. But the entry points are favorite drivers, favorite auto company, your favorite style of racing, right? Whether it's like a 2.5 mile plate race or a road course or a short track. But they've got some really different entry points. Think about like favorite sponsor. I always think of Kyle Busch, who had M&Ms on his car for a long time, right? My kid loved the M&Ms car, so he sort of became a Kyle Busch fan. What you pull from that, I think, is applicable across all sports, but people connect to personalities, they connect to rivalries, they connect to storylines and narrative. And so NASCAR, for me, from an experiential standpoint, was really valuable because it just gave a different perspective and kind of shown a different light on the sports world that I maybe wouldn't have otherwise gotten had I stayed in soccer the whole time.
Understood. Moving on to Pathway, your initiative to help professionals build a career in soccer is amazing. I'm on your newsletter, so guys, check it out. Can you share some specific challenges that aspiring individuals face in breaking into the soccer industry and how Pathway aims to address these challenges?
Yeah, I think it's, the sort of starting point, Kareem, is it's similar to thinking with name and number, which is, man, there are a ton of resources out there that exist for finding a job or building a career. Sort of too many to count, but almost none, and there are a few, but very few that are soccer industry specific. And there are several that are sports specific. As someone who spent basically their entire career in the industry, and I got my first job, entry level position at DC United by applying on Teamwork Online and crossing my fingers and hoping. And I was one of the fortunate ones who got picked up kind of off the pile. But I've hired a lot of people over the course of my career, and it's hard to avoid that. Jobs in sports, jobs in soccer, it's 300, 400, 500 applicants every time a new job is posted because people so badly want to work in the sport. And that's a really positive thing. But how you secure or attempt to secure a job in soccer has nuance to it. And so myself and my two co-founders, we've got over 40 plus years working in soccer, both on the business and sporting side of the industry. We've sort of been there. We know how hard it is to break into the industry. So our mission ultimately is to help ambitious, and I say that intentionally, ambitious professionals break into and then build a career in the sport. We've launched with the newsletter, as you mentioned. Issue 5 hit today. Every issue has an interview with sort of what we call a soccer thought leader, somebody who's figured it out and found their spot in the industry. And we try to be really intentional about asking them specific questions that help them share the tactics and best practices that someone who wants to break into or grow their career can ultimately apply. We also include we call it "Do This Now," which is a bad name, and a marketer like me should come up with something better. But it's we want to provide really tactical, applicable advice and tips that you can implement the moment you read it that will help improve your chances of getting noticed, growing your community, all the different ways you try to, kind of differentiate yourself from other candidates. So we're early days. We're kind of building in public. There's a lot more that we're working on that, we hope to kind of reveal in the coming months as we put it together. But ultimately, the response has been incredibly positive, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, nice. It's really hard to break in, and it takes a long time to build relationships. You mentioned building in public. It's something that I have experience with building One Soccer Nation, and there's a lot of benefits to it. People seeing your progress, the transparency. So it's super cool. What benefits are you seeing with? Why are you guys deciding to build public, and what benefits or positive responses are you getting from it?
Yeah, I think I sort of have done this inherently, Kareem, just over the course of my career. I mean, I remember, when I was at DC United early in my career and Twitter kind of launched, and you sort of had this realization that my background's in traditional PR. So I spent a lot of my early career trying to get local TV stations and newspapers to cover DC United. And it was really hard because it's a big market with a lot of other sports teams. And there was sort of a light bulb moment when Twitter launched. Of course, Facebook already existed, but where you could just directly communicate with fans and you could respond to them immediately. And um, I think it's just an extension of that philosophy, really, right? Which is that you can build community, you can have communication. So much of what's great about sports and soccer specifically is the connections that are created, whether that's a familial connection or a friendship or someone who just loves the same club you do. So um, it's a long way of saying, I think that by building in public, you sort of said it already, but people are seeing your progress. They're seeing you explore. They're seeing you react to feedback. I think that's one of the big pieces is I like to say you sort of build and learn and then build and listen. And so the community will give you real-time feedback on what they do or don't like. We haven't done it yet, but just as an example, at some point in the near term, we'll do a little survey with subscribers to Pathway and say, what's working for you? What's not? What else would you like to see? And I think the important thing is then you adapt and you listen to the feedback. I guess it kind of just speaks to the customer is always right, which is a phrase that's been around for a long time. But I think building in public kind of allows you to do that in real time in a way that can be really efficient and effective.
Yeah. You mentioned vetting talent. What are three key things, and you've done it for a while now, what are three key things that you look for that really, make someone stand out and say to you that, I really want to take this person on?
Yeah, you heard me say the word ambitious earlier. I think that's the starting point is when you find someone who is clearly ambitious and resilient and kind of continues to get after it, even when there may be a barrier or a disappointment. That sort of mentality, I think, is something that folks look for and typically proves out to be those are the folks that become good employees who go and crush for you. So that's the first thing I would say. Second is I think soft skills. Alan Hopkins, who's the executive director for Black Players for Change and has had this amazing career in American soccer versus a broadcaster and across a bunch of different areas. He mentioned he mentioned this idea that you have to be resilient, but you can reverse engineer to your career. And if you kind of have an idea of where you want to go, is that you can build towards it. And so I think, having an understanding of what you're trying to do, having that resiliency. And then the other thing he said was that soft skills are actually hard skills. So it's hard to measure this sometimes, but someone who is a good writer, who's articulate, who can be succinct, who understands, has a bit of a social EQ. They kind of have an emotional intelligence about them. I'd say those soft skills are number two. And then number three, ultimately, is that not every job requires a really specific expertise, but I'm referencing our Pathway soccer thought leaders, but Pete Wood, who's the VP of Content and Creative at St. Louis City SC, he said he looks for superpowers. So not every job has to have a superpower necessarily, but especially in the creative space, is your superpower motion and animation? Is your superpower graphic design? Is your superpower client management? So looking for that sort of specialist component, I think, is the other thing that typically leads to really good hires. So those are the three things I'd mention.
Thank you for sharing that. As a veteran in American soccer, what advice would you give to young professionals aspiring to make a meaningful impact in the industry, both on and off the field?
Yeah, I mean, I think for those that want to help build the sport, certainly it's one of the reasons I got into it was not just I enjoyed working in it, but the idea of helping the sport grow was always something that was a driver for me. So I like to do a little exercise. I tell folks that I maybe speak to early in their careers, try to paint the biggest, most aspirational picture you can imagine for your career and work towards that goal, right? That may be a CMO or a head coach for an MLS or an NWSL team, or it may be going abroad and working for Borussia Dortmund or Fulham FC. And ultimately, the more you can do on sort of the business side of the sport, certainly the bigger impact you're going to have. And I'd say that's kind of the big sort of businessy answer. And then the other piece I would say, and I think this maybe gets overlooked sometimes, is identify an opportunity in your backyard where you can help grow the game at a real grassroots level, right? That could be like what I do is I volunteer to coach my kids' local AYSO team. Shout out Lightning Tigers. And it's just, it's helping pass along love of the game. It's helping kids understand it's not only about the competition, which is important, but it's about having fun. It could be volunteering for an organization like Street Soccer USA, who's now, across, I think, something like 15 cities in the US, and is doing incredible work at the grassroots level. So, if you're a creative, giving time or work to a nonprofit organization who's building a sport. I mean, this country's now has just this amazing variety of organizations who are using soccer as a vehicle for positive change. And so if you have talent and are a creative or a good thinker, apply some of that to some of these organizations is what I would say. So there's sort of the business big picture component, and then the small grassroots local impact piece that I think typically bodes well.
Thank you for sharing that. Where can, the viewers that, may want to hire you or may want to get in contact to ask questions, where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, the agency website is very simply nameandnumber.com, all spelled out. That has most of our recent work from this year. We've just updated the website. We hit our year anniversary a few weeks ago. So new, fresh website there with a number of the projects we've taken on this year. And then for Pathway, it's pathwayhq.com. That will link to our most recent issues of the newsletter, which hits every Wednesday. Yeah, you can find contact information there, email addresses, and we're across all the social channels you might expect. So we're pretty responsive. If you send an email or drop into our DMs, we're pretty good about getting back to folks.
Guys, go check it out. And we'll have everything linked down in the description. With saying that, Kyle, was there anything that I missed or that you wanted to add in?
No, I think really appreciate the conversation. I think just to finish with, I obviously love the sport. I think soccer is a really unique community, and there's a lot of incredible things happening right now. I encourage folks who also love it, keep at it. For those that are trying to break in, it takes time. It does take resiliency, and don't let a barrier or a disappointment get in your way. So keep getting after it. So thanks for the time, Kareem. It's been great talking to you.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time, Kyle. And thank you for being on the One Soccer Nation podcast today.